The research station Haven's Reach floated in the endless dark above a dying red star. Its metal halls were filled with the hum of machines, faint vibrations that reminded every crew member how fragile their safety really was. Beyond the thick windows, the star pulsed with a tired glow, throwing shadows that stretched like fingers across the corridors. Humanity had built this station not only for research, but also as a neutral ground for meetings with alien envoys. It was here that Captain Elias Grant had been posted, and it was here his life would change forever. Elias had been an engineer before he became a captain. His hands were more used to wires, tools, and panels than to paperwork or politics. Yet the Interstellar Council believed someone like him, someone practical and grounded, could handle the upcoming mission better than a polished diplomat. He had laughed when he first received the assignment, but deep inside he knew why they had chosen him. He was steady, calm, human in the purest sense. The Volari were coming. The Volari were not like any other species humanity had met. Tall, graceful, armored in ceremonial suits that shimmered like crystal, they were respected and feared in equal measure. Their society was old, older than humanity's first sparks of civilization. They were warriors once, conquerors who had built an empire that stretched across star systems. But centuries of endless conflict had left their people hollow. Rumors said their culture had become cold, their emotions dulled, as if burned away by too many wars. When word came that a Volari envoy was traveling to Haven's Reach for private talks, the whole crew felt the weight of history pressing down on them. This was not just a diplomatic visit, it was a test. If humanity passed, they might earn the Volari's trust. If they failed, the fragile balance of power in the galaxy might shatter. Elias stood in his quarters adjusting the collar of his uniform. He preferred simple clothes, but tonight he had to wear the formal dark blue of the station officers. The polished surface of his small desk reflected his tired face. He leaned closer to the mirror and muttered, "Just don't say anything stupid, Grant." He wasn't prepared for what happened next. The door slid open without warning. Normally, security codes would prevent anyone from barging into a captain's quarters, but the station's systems gave priority to visiting envoys. Elias turned sharply, expecting a guard, or at least an aide. Instead, he froze. The Volari envoy entered silently. She was tall, nearly a head taller than Elias, her armor glinting in the dim light. The plates were etched with flowing designs that seemed alive, shifting as she moved. Her helmet dissolved back into the collar with a faint hiss, revealing a face both alien and strangely familiar. Her skin carried a faint silver sheen, her eyes a deep violet that reflected the glow of the star outside. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Elias felt the air grow heavy, the silence stretching until it seemed unbearable. Then, to his shock, she began to remove her armor. Piece by piece, the ceremonial plate slid off with soft clicks. First the shoulder guards, then the chest plate, then the arm and leg coverings. The armor fell to the floor in a neat pile, each piece glowing faintly before dimming to stillness. Elias blinked in disbelief. No alien envoy had ever acted like this before. What are you doing?" he asked, his voice breaking the silence. The Volari woman said nothing. She moved with deliberate grace, her silver-hued form now revealed in a simple underlayer of fabric, soft and flowing, not unlike ancient human robes. She stepped forward, closing the space between them until Elias could hear her calm breathing. Without a word, she lowered herself onto the narrow bed in his quarters. Then, in a motion so deliberate it felt ritualistic, she lay across his chest. Elias froze. His mind screamed with questions. Was this an attack, a test, a cultural ritual? Her weight was light, almost delicate, but the act was overwhelming in its intimacy. He could feel the rhythm of her breath syncing with his, her violet eyes half closed as if listening to something deeper than sound. He opened his mouth to speak again, but stopped. Something strange was happening. A warmth spread through his chest, radiating outward. A sensation not physical but emotional. It was as if her presence was pressing directly against his spirit. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was low, melodic, carrying an accent shaped by a language older than human civilization. "You do not understand yet, human, but you will," Elias swallowed. His instincts told him not to push her away, not to interrupt. He had been trained to respect alien customs, no matter how confusing they seemed, so he lay still, letting her complete whatever ritual she had begun. Minutes passed like hours. The silence was no longer heavy. It was alive, filled with something he could not name. When she finally rose from his chest, she looked down at him with an expression he could not read. "My name is Caleth," she said. "I am Velari. I have chosen the right of laying the heart. It is the way of my people when we seek truth." Elias sat up slowly, trying to steady his thoughts. "Right of what?" Caleth tilted her head slightly as if studying a puzzle. "The right of laying the heart. We shed the armor that hides us. We place ourselves across another spirit to see if the bond awakens." "Bond?" Elias repeated. "Yes." Her violet eyes gleamed with faint light. "With others there is only silence. With humans—" She paused, searching for words. "With humans there is resonance. We hear something again. A music we thought long dead." Elias frowned, trying to process her words. "You mean emotions? Connection?" Caleth gave a slow nod. "Yes, we lost it long ago. But with your kind, it returns." The weight of her statement hit him like a shockwave. Humanity, still young compared to most species, had always wondered what unique qualities set them apart in the galaxy. Technology? Adaptability? Perhaps it was none of those things. Perhaps it was this strange, fragile capacity to feel deeply and to awaken that feeling in others. Elias rubbed the back of his neck. "So, what happens now?" Caleth straightened, her silver hair catching the dim light. "Now we see if the bond holds." Before he could ask further, the station intercom buzzed, announcing the arrival of other Velari council members. The spell of the moment broke, but the weight of what had happened remained heavy in Elias's chest. As Caleth collected her armor pieces with calm precision, Elias realized something important. This was not just a visit. This was a turning point. The Velari had come not just for diplomacy, but for something far deeper. They had come because only humans could give them what they were losing, the ability to feel. And somehow, by lying across his chest in silence, Caleth had already begun to prove it. The next morning aboard Haven's Reach felt heavier than usual. The station's lights slowly shifted from night cycle to day, but for Captain Elias Grant, sleep had been impossible. He had spent most of the night staring at the ceiling of his quarters, replaying the strange encounter with Caleth again and again. He could still feel the faint warmth in his chest where she had lain across him. It wasn't physical, not exactly. It was something deeper, like an echo that refused to fade. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her violet gaze fixed on him, unreadable and calm. Elias finally gave up on rest and dressed in his uniform. His comm tablet buzzed almost as soon as he clipped it to his belt. It was Commander Elia, his second in command. "Captain, the Velari envoy requests to see you again. Private chambers." Elias sighed. Of course they do. He wasn't ready, but then again he doubted anyone could be ready for the Velari. When he arrived at the designated chamber, he found Caleth already waiting. The room was quiet, its walls lined with soft lights that pulsed in rhythm with the station's systems. She stood near the wide observation window, her armor set aside once more. This time she wore only her flowing underlayer, silver threads woven through dark fabric like starlight captured in cloth. Caleth turned as he entered. Her expression was calm, but her eyes studied him with an intensity that made his skin prickle. "You came," she said simply. Elias cleared his throat. "You asked." Silence stretched for a moment before she gestured for him to sit. He obeyed, lowering himself into one of the station's metal chairs. Caleth remained standing, her posture tall and deliberate as if every movement was part of a ceremony. "You are still unsettled," she said. "Unsettled?" Elias let out a small laugh. "That's one word for it. You slipped into my quarters, stripped off your armor, and then, well, laid across my chest. I think unsettled is putting it mildly." Caleth tilted her head slightly, considering his words. "For us it is not strange. For us it is the most sacred act." Elias leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Sacred, right, you called it—" "What was it? The right of laying the heart?" "Yes. So what does that actually mean? Because from where I stand, it looked like you were either testing me or trying to get me thrown out of the fleet." For the first time, Caleth smiled faintly. It was not a wide smile, but it carried something rare, something soft. "It is neither. It is truth." She moved to stand directly across from him, her gaze unblinking. "Long ago, the Velari were like you, alive with feeling. We laughed, we wept, we burned with joy and sorrow. But centuries of war took that from us. We built walls around our hearts, walls that never fell. We learned to fight, but we forgot how to feel. Her voice grew quieter, carrying a weight that filled the chamber. We tried to reclaim it, but the walls grew higher with each generation. Soon there was nothing left inside. Only silence. Elias frowned. He had read reports of the Volari in the fleet's archives, descriptions of them as cold, disciplined, unshakable. But hearing it from Kalith herself made it sound less like strength and more like tragedy. "So this ritual of yours," he said slowly, "it's about breaking those walls." Kalith nodded. "Yes, the rite of laying the heart is the act of surrender. We strip away the armor that hides us. We place ourselves across another being, so close that nothing separates spirit from spirit. In the silence we listen. If the bond awakens, we feel again." Elias leaned back in his chair, absorbing her words. "And you chose to do this with me, why?" Kalith's violet eyes glowed faintly in the light. "Because humans are different. With others there is only emptiness. With humans there is resonance. Your kind awakens us." The words struck Elias harder than he expected. Humanity, still new among the stars, had always felt like the younger sibling in the galactic community. Eager, curious, but inexperienced. To hear that they possessed something no other species had was both humbling and frightening. "You really believe that?" he asked quietly. Kalith's expression remained steady. "I know it. When I lay across your chest, I felt it. A warmth, a rhythm. The walls inside me trembled. It has been centuries since a Volari felt such a thing." Elias rubbed his temples. He wasn't a diplomat, but he understood the weight of her confession. If what she said was true, then humanity wasn't just another race in the galaxy. They were something more, something vital. "All right," he said at last. "Let's say I believe you. What happens next? What do the Volari want from us?" Kalith paused, her gaze drifting toward the window. Outside, the dying red star pulsed with weak light, its surface roiling in slow storms. "My people are at a crossroads. Without feeling, we will fade. We will become hollow shells. But with humans, there is a chance to remember, a chance to heal." She turned back to him, her eyes sharp now. "That is why I was sent. Not for trade. Not for politics. But for this. To see if the bond is real." Elias sat in silence, the enormity of her words pressing down on him. It wasn't just a meeting. It wasn't just a ritual. This was a test that could decide the future of an entire species. And somehow, he had become the center of it. The conversation stretched on for hours. Kalith explained fragments of Volari history, how their greatest victories had cost them their hearts, how even their songs had fallen silent. She spoke of their children, born without laughter, raised in a culture of discipline but not joy. Elias listened, torn between sorrow and disbelief. "You're saying," he murmured at one point, "that your entire civilization is depending on human emotions?" Kalith gave a single nod. "Yes, you see weakness. We see survival." Elias let out a slow breath. "Well, we've been called emotional before. Hot-headed, reckless. Maybe that's not such a bad thing after all." For the first time, Kalith's smile grew a little wider. It was faint, almost shy, but it lit her alien features in a way Elias found disarming. "Reckless," she repeated softly. "Yes, reckless, but alive." Later that day, Elias walked through the corridors of Haven's Reach, his thoughts heavy. Crew members greeted him with nods, but he barely noticed. His mind replayed Kalith's words over and over. "Humans awaken us." The phrase echoed like a song in his skull. He stopped by a wide observation deck, staring out at the dying star. The red light washed over the metal walls, painting them in shades of fire. For the first time, Elias wondered if humanity's place in the galaxy wasn't about technology or military strength. Maybe it was about something else entirely, something far more difficult to measure. Behind him, footsteps echoed softly. He didn't need to turn to know who it was. "Still unsettled?" Kalith asked. Elias smiled faintly. "That word again." Kalith stepped beside him, her presence calm, her gaze fixed on the star. For a long time, they said nothing, only watching the slow, heavy storms of plasma on the star's surface. Finally, Elias broke the silence. "You know, back on Earth, there's an old saying, 'The heart sees what is invisible to the eye.' I never really thought much about it before. But now," Kalith tilted her head, studying him. "Your words carry weight." "Not mine," Elias said. "But maybe it's what your people need to hear." Calith's violet eyes softened. Perhaps that is why we need you. The warmth returned to Elias's chest, faint but undeniable. He didn't know what it meant yet. But he knew one thing. This was only the beginning, and whatever came next, it would change everything. The corridors of Haven's Reach were busier than usual. Since Calith's arrival, the crew had been on edge, not because she was hostile, but because everyone sensed the weight of her presence. The Valari were legends. To have one walking the station's halls in silence was like living next to a storm, calm for now, but powerful enough to destroy everything if angered. Captain Elias Grant tried to keep his crew calm, but he felt the tension himself. Calith's words still echoed in his mind. With humans, there is resonance. He wanted to believe her, but the idea that humanity was somehow responsible for saving an entire alien civilization made him uneasy. He was just one man, one captain, and hardly a diplomat. Yet here he was, caught in the middle of something far larger than himself. What he didn't know was that danger was already approaching. In the dark stretches beyond the dying red star, a Korth vessel drifted silently. Unlike the Valari, the Korth were not elegant or ceremonial. They were predators, a species that thrived on conquest and intimidation. Their ships reflected their nature, jagged black structures bristling with weapons, built not for beauty but for destruction. On the Korth command deck, Commander Rahl watched the holographic display with cold satisfaction. The humans and Valari were holding private talks aboard the station, but to him this was an opportunity. If the Valari bind themselves to the humans, the balance shifts, Rahl growled to his officers. The Council will favor them and our strength will be questioned. We cannot allow it. One of his lieutenants bowed their head. What is your command? Rahl's crimson eyes narrowed. We make the humans weak. We break the Valari bond before it grows, quietly but decisively. Back on Haven's Reach, Elias was in the engineering bay, his old comfort zone. Rows of glowing consoles and humming reactors lined the room. Here at least he could focus on machines instead of politics. Calith stood nearby, watching with her calm violet gaze. She had insisted on accompanying him, saying she wanted to see the heart of the station. Elias doubted she cared much about engines, but he let her stay. You are most at ease here, she observed. Elias chuckled. That obvious, huh? He tightened a bolt on a plasma regulator and leaned back. Engines don't lie. They break, they leak, they burn out, but they don't pretend to be something they're not. People are harder to read. Calith considered this. Valari once thought the same. But then we became too predictable ourselves. Too easy to read. Machines without feeling. Elias glanced at her. You really believe we can fix that? I do not believe, Calith said softly. I feel. Before Elias could reply, alarms blared through the engineering bay. Red lights flashed along the walls, and the hum of the station's systems shifted into a strained whine. Warning! The intercom blared. Power fluctuation detected. Reactor stability compromised. Elias's instincts kicked in. He rushed to the nearest console, fingers flying across the controls. This isn't right. The reactor's readings were stable a minute ago. Calith moved closer. Is it failure? Not a natural one, Elias muttered. This looks like sabotage. The truth struck quickly. Across the station, systems began to fail one by one. Life support, communications, even defense turrets. Crew members scrambled through the halls, shouting orders, while emergency lights painted everything in crimson. In the command center, Commander Alaya barked into her headset. Seal all non-essential sections. Keep power to life support and shields. Find the source of this breach. But the sabotage was too well coordinated. The attackers knew exactly where to strike. Back in engineering, Elias cursed under his breath. Someone planted viruses in the system. They're trying to overload the reactor. Calith's eyes narrowed. The Korth. Elias looked at her sharply. You're sure? They fear the bond between us, Calith said. They would rather destroy it before it grows. The reactor's warning lights blazed brighter. Elias worked furiously, but the virus kept rewriting his commands. I can slow it down, but I can't stop it completely from here. Calith stepped beside him. Then what do we do? Elias paused, sweat beading on his forehead. He thought fast, his human instinct for improvisation taking over. We'll have to bypass the system. Manual override, Calith frowned. That is dangerous. Yeah, Elias said with a grim smile. That's kind of my specialty. They raced through the maintenance corridors beneath the reactor chamber. The narrow passages were hot, filled with the rumble of the station's failing systems. Sparks leapt from exposed wires as they passed, the air smelling of burning insulation. Elias led the way, pulling open panels and rerouting power with makeshift tools. Kaleth followed close behind, her movements sharp and precise but clearly unfamiliar with this kind of work. She had been trained for battle, not for crawling through ducts with a wrench in hand. "You improvise without fear," she observed as Elias cut a wire and reattached it in an unorthodox way. "Not without fear," Elias corrected, wiping sweat from his brow. "With fear. That's the difference. You feel it, but you move anyway." Kaleth considered his words as she handed him a tool. "Valari do not act so. We move only with certainty." "Certainty gets you killed when things go wrong," Elias said. He tightened the last bolt and grinned. "Sometimes you have to guess. Sometimes you have to take the leap." The reactor's hum began to stabilize, but only slightly. Elias frowned. "It's holding for now, but the virus is still in the system. Someone's guiding it. They're not done." As if to prove him right, the station shuddered violently. A booming sound echoed through the halls. An explosion somewhere near the docking bays. Kaleth's eyes darkened. "They are here." The Korth strike team had boarded the station, armed with jagged weapons and heavy armor. They moved through the docking bays like shadows, cutting down automated defenses with brutal efficiency. Their goal was not to destroy the station outright, but to send a message. The Valari must not bond with humans. In the command center, Aaliyah's voice cracked through the intercom. "Captain Grant. Korth forces are inside. We need you on defense." Elias exchanged a quick glance with Kaleth. He knew he should head to the command center, but something told him the reactor was still the real target. "They want us distracted," Elias said. "If the reactor goes, the whole station goes with it." Kaleth nodded. "Then we hold it together." The final stretch to the reactor core was the hardest. The chamber doors were locked down, overridden by the virus. Elias pulled out a manual crank, forcing the doors open with raw effort. Kaleth stepped through first, scanning the shadows with sharp eyes. Inside, the reactor glowed dangerously bright, its energy surging like a storm barely contained. The virus's code pulsed across the control screens, twisting the systems into chaos. Elias ran to the nearest console. "I need time to reset this manually." Kaleth drew a slender blade from her armor, ceremonial but deadly enough. "Then I will give you time." As if on cue, the chamber door shuddered. Korth soldiers forced their way inside, their red armor gleaming in the reactor's glow. With guttural roars they charged. Kaleth met them head-on. Her movements were fluid, every strike precise, every motion carrying centuries of warrior tradition. But there were many, and she could not hold them forever. Elias worked furiously at the controls, fingers moving faster than he thought possible. The virus fought him at every step, twisting his commands, but he pushed back with creativity. Where the virus expected logic, he gave chaos. Where it expected order, he gave improvisation. The system shuddered under his unconventional methods. Sparks flew. The console screamed warnings. Finally, with one last desperate command, Elias slammed his hand against the panel. The reactor's glow dimmed, stabilizing. The virus collapsed, its code shredded by the unorthodox override. Elias let out a shaky breath. "Got it." Kaleth struck down the last Korth soldier, her blade humming as it withdrew. She turned to Elias, breathing heavily. "You did it." Elias leaned against the console, exhausted. "We did it." Their eyes met, and in that moment something passed between them again. The warmth, the resonance she had spoken of. Not just in ritual this time, but in battle, in survival, in trust. Kaleth sheathed her blade slowly. "This is what I meant. You act in ways no other species dares. Reckless, but alive. That is why we need you." Elias gave a tired smile. "Glad my bad habits are useful to someone." But deep down he knew this was only the beginning. The Korth would not stop, and whatever this bond was between him and Kaleth, it was about to be tested like never before. The aftermath of the reactor battle left Haven's reach shaken. The crew worked around the clock to repair the damage caused by the sabotage, welding broken panels, sealing breached corridors, and purging the remnants of the virus from the system. The faint smell of smoke and burnt metal still lingered in the air. Captain Elias Grant walked through the halls with heavy steps. Everywhere he looked, he saw tired faces. Humans and allied staff working side by side to hold the station together. Yet despite the chaos, there was pride in their eyes. They had survived, but Elias knew the danger wasn't over. The Korth had revealed their intentions. They were not going to let the Valari and humans grow closer. And worse, the Valari Council itself had begun to show doubt. In the private chamber where she often stayed, Kaleth received a direct transmission from her council. A shimmering projection filled the room, displaying 3 elder Valari, their faces sharp and cold. "You have gone too far," one of them declared. "You performed the rite of laying the heart with a human. You fight beside him. You begin to feel again. This is dangerous." Kaleth stood tall, unflinching under their gaze. "It is not dangerous, it is life. The resonance is real. With humans, the silence breaks. I felt it." Another elder shook her head. "The Korth see your actions as weakness. They already strike at you. If you continue this bond, they will declare war." "Let them," Kaleth replied firmly. "Better war with a heart than peace with an empty soul." The council murmured among themselves, clearly unsettled by her defiance. Finally, the eldest spoke. "You risk not only yourself but our entire people. We command you, sever the bond. End this ritual. Return to us as Valari, not as something less." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the chamber in silence. Kaleth's hands clenched at her sides, her jaw tight. For centuries, no Valari had defied the council so openly, but for the first time she was certain she could not turn back. Elias found her standing near the observation window, her silver hair catching the dying red star's light. He had heard parts of the transmission through the station's sensors. "They want you to give up," he said quietly. Kaleth turned to him. "Yes, they see feeling as weakness. They fear it, but what they fear more is change." Elias stepped closer. "And what do you want?" For a long moment she was silent. Then she spoke softly. "I want to live again. Not as a shadow of what my people once were. I want them to feel the sun, the stars, the laughter that was lost. And I want them to see what I see when I look at you." Elias's chest tightened. He wasn't a poet, he wasn't a diplomat, he was an engineer. But he understood the weight in her words. "Then we fight for it," he said firmly. "Together." The fight came sooner than expected. Sensors lit up with warnings. Korth ships were approaching the station in force. Not a hidden strike team this time, but a fleet. Their jagged silhouettes filled the holographic displays. Weapons charged, ready to end the fragile peace. Commander Aliyah turned to Elias in the command center, her voice tight with urgency. "Captain, they're hailing us." Elias nodded. "Put them through." The screen flickered to reveal Commander Rahl, the same crimson-eyed Korth who had ordered the sabotage. His voice was deep, heavy with contempt. "Humans," he snarled. "Valari, you think you can bind yourselves together? You think the galaxy will allow it? No, you will break, or we will break you." Elias stood firm, his voice calm. "We're not breaking." "Not today," Rahl sneered. "Then you will burn." The transmission cut and the attack began. The Korth fleet opened fire. Blazing energy bolts slammed against Haven's Reach's shields, shaking the station violently. Crew members stumbled as consoles sparked and alarms blared. The shield strength dropped with every hit. "Return fire," Elias ordered. The station's turrets responded, launching volleys of plasma bolts at the Korth ships. Explosions lit the void outside, but the enemy numbers were overwhelming. For every Korth ship destroyed, 2 more pressed forward. In the chaos, Elias worked with his crew, issuing orders, rerouting power, making decisions faster than he ever had before. Kaleth stood at his side, her presence steady and commanding, lending him strength. But even with all their efforts, it was clear the station would not last. Then came the breaking point. A massive Korth warship moved into position, charging a weapon powerful enough to pierce the station's shields entirely. If it fired, Haven's Reach would be torn apart. The crew stared in horror at the readings. Commander Aliyah whispered, "We can't stop that." Elias's mind raced. He knew standard tactics wouldn't work. The Korth expected predictable resistance, but humans weren't predictable. That was their strength. He slammed his fist against the console. "Prepare the docking bays. I'm taking a shuttle." The command center went silent. Aliyah turned to him, shocked. "Captain, that's suicide." Elias met her gaze with steady eyes. "Not if it works." Kaleth stepped forward instantly. "Then I go with you." "No," Elias said quickly. "If you're gone, the Valari Council will never accept this bond. You need to survive." Kaleth shook her head, her voice fierce. "And if you fall, the bond dies anyway. I will not let you face them alone, their eyes locked. Elias saw the fire in her gaze, the determination that mirrored his own. Slowly he nodded. All right, we do this together. The shuttle tore free from the docking bay, engines flaring as it raced toward the massive Korth warship. Inside the cramped cockpit, Elias piloted with steady hands weaving through streams of enemy fire. Kaleth manned the weapons, her strikes precise and deadly, buying them precious seconds. The warship loomed larger and larger, its weapon charging to full power. The glow from its core bathed the shuttle in red light like the glare of an angry star. Elias gritted his teeth. We can't outgun it, but maybe we don't have to. Kaleth glanced at him. What do you mean? Elias gave a tight smile. Humans don't always fight fair. He pushed the shuttle into a wild spin, diving low beneath the warship's shields. The ship groaned under the stress, alarms screaming, but Elias kept control. He guided the shuttle straight toward the exposed weapon core where the energy buildup was unstable. Kaleth's eyes widened. You mean to overload it? Exactly, Elias said. One reckless move and it'll destroy itself. Kaleth placed her hand on his shoulder, steady and firm. Then let us make the leap. The shuttle's weapons fired in a final desperate volley, striking the warship's glowing core. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the energy inside the Korth weapon surged out of control. The warship erupted in a massive explosion, light bursting across the void like a newborn sun. The shockwave hurled the shuttle back, alarms blaring as the controls shook in Elias's hands. But they survived. Barely. As the light faded, the remaining Korth fleet broke formation, retreating into the void. Without their flagship, their courage faltered. The battle was won. Inside the battered shuttle, Elias and Kaleth sat in silence, breathing hard. The glow of the destroyed warship reflected in her violet eyes. Slowly she turned to him. This is what I meant, she said softly. Reckless, impossible, and yet alive. Elias managed a tired smile. Glad it worked. Kaleth leaned closer, her voice steady. The bond holds. Stronger than before. I will not sever it. Not for the Council. Not for anyone. Elias met her gaze, feeling the warmth in his chest once again. Whatever this bond was, it had carried them through fire and death. And it was only growing stronger. Back on Haven's Reach, the crew cheered their return. The station was battered but alive. Humanity and Valari had stood together against the Korth and survived. Yet Elias knew the fight wasn't over. The Valari Council still opposed the bond. The Korth would surely return. And the galaxy itself was watching, waiting to see what humanity would do next. But for the first time, Elias didn't feel uncertain. They would fight. They would endure, and they would prove to everyone that humans were more than just survivors. They were the spark the galaxy had forgotten, and now that spark had ignited something greater. The aftermath of the Korth attack left Haven's Reach battered but not broken. The station's corridors were still filled with the hum of repairs, the hiss of welding torches, and the quiet footsteps of crew members working late into the cycle. Walls bore scorch marks, panels were dented, and yet life thrived among the ruins. Humanity and Valari had endured together, and that endurance carried a lesson far greater than survival. Captain Elias Grant walked through the halls, observing the crew. Each human and Valari worker moved with purpose, their motions precise but flexible. There was pride in their eyes, not just for surviving the Korth assault, but for proving that unity between species was not only possible, but powerful. Kaleth walked beside him, her presence calm, but commanding. She had spent days coordinating repairs with Valari engineers, teaching them methods of improvisation and adaptability, lessons no Valari Council had ever thought to include in their teachings. You move differently than your people expect, Elias said quietly. They must find it. Unsettling, Kaleth smiled faintly. Perhaps, but it is necessary. To survive, sometimes one must step outside the expected path. Elias nodded. That's humans in a nutshell. Reckless, yes, but alive. Kaleth's violet eyes glimmered. Alive, yes, that is what we have rediscovered. Not just survival, but life. Meanwhile, the Valari Council convened in their floating chamber above the station. The three elders who had opposed Kaleth's bond with Elias now faced undeniable evidence. Reports flooded in from the crew and censors alike. Not only had the humans survived, but they had saved the station protected the Valari, and repelled the Korth fleet. This cannot be ignored, said the eldest council member, his silver hair rippling in zero gravity. The humans, they are not what we thought. They are reckless but effective, bold but wise. Perhaps we underestimated them. Another elder frowned. Kaleth's defiance is unprecedented. No Valari has ever challenged us so openly. And yet, the bond has strengthened her. She moves with purpose, not fear. She has awakened something we thought lost. The council remained silent for a long moment. The dying red star glowed in the distance through the chamber's windows, casting shadows that stretched across the ancient walls. Finally, the eldest spoke again. Prepare a formal session. The humans must be recognized not as allies only, but as partners. Their presence is no longer optional. The galaxy has shifted. Back on the station, Elias and Kaleth prepared for the council meeting. Elias adjusted his uniform, but the nerves that always accompanied ceremony were replaced with calm determination. Kaleth walked beside him, radiating quiet confidence. The chamber was enormous, filled with floating Valari figures whose eyes regarded the humans with curiosity, respect, and caution. Elias stepped forward. Kaleth stayed at his side, a silent anchor. Captain Grant, the eldest council member, began. You and your people have proven something unexpected, that humans are more than their technology, that they are more than their adaptability. They possess a quality we have long forgotten. They awaken hearts. Elias straightened. We did what we had to do. We survived, and we fought to protect life. Kaleth stepped closer, her voice steady. And humans have reminded us that to survive without feeling is not truly to live. The bond I share with Captain Grant is proof that connection strengthens us, even when it seems impossible. The chamber was silent for a moment. The Valari elders exchanged glances, weighing centuries of tradition against undeniable truth. Finally, the eldest council member spoke. The rite of laying the heart. It has awakened something in Valari long thought lost. This bond was recognized. It is sanctioned. Not only shall Kaleth continue, but the humans shall have the right to assist in guiding our people forward. Elias blinked. Recognition, approval, something he had never imagined could come from beings as ancient and disciplined as the Valari. Kaleth's hand brushed his arm lightly. It is done, she whispered. Outside, the red star's light shone brighter as if celebrating the newfound alliance. Crew members of both species gathered in the observation decks, witnessing the moment history shifted. Elias looked at Kaleth. So, we really did it. We survived, and we changed their minds. Kaleth's violet eyes glimmered. Yes, but this is only the beginning. The galaxy is watching. Others will challenge this bond. The Korth will return, but now we are not alone. We are not just humans and Valari. We are stronger together. Elias felt a warmth spread through his chest. The same warmth from their first ritual, only now deeper. He realized it was more than the bond between two people. It was a bond between species, a promise of trust and collaboration. We'll face whatever comes next, he said firmly. Together. Kaleth nodded. Together. The station, once a quiet research outpost, became a symbol of hope and unity. Across the galaxy, other species took notice. The story of humans and Valari standing side by side, surviving impossible odds and creating something new inspired others. Some were skeptical, but many began to see a future where alliances were built not on fear but on trust, understanding, and shared courage. Elias returned to the engineering bay after the council meeting. Sparks flew from repairs, machines hummed with renewed life, and the crew worked tirelessly. He looked around and smiled. You know, Kaleth said, standing beside him once more. You humans are remarkable, Elias laughed softly. Remarkable, huh? That's one way to put it. I'd say we're stubborn, reckless, and occasionally impossible. But I'll take remarkable if you like it. Kaleth's smile widened. It suits you, and it suits all of humanity. Perhaps that is why we need you, why the galaxy needs you. Elias leaned back, looking at the glowing panels, the repaired conduits, the crew moving with purpose. Maybe so. Maybe humans aren't just survivors. Maybe we're the spark that keeps the universe alive. Kaleth placed her hand lightly on his shoulder. And now that spark has ignited a flame that will burn across the stars. Weeks passed and Haven's reach recovered fully. The Korth had retreated, but their threat lingered, a reminder that peace and unity were fragile. Yet the bond between humans and Valari grew stronger with every shared task, every moment of trust, and every lesson in survival. Calith taught Valari engineers how to improvise under pressure, how to see solutions beyond strict logic. Elias guided humans to respect Valari traditions while adapting them in creative ways. Together they built a station where the impossible became possible, and across the galaxy, the story spread, humans and Valari, two species once separated by fear and misunderstanding, had found strength in connection. They had proven that courage, empathy, and ingenuity could unite even the oldest civilizations. For Elias, it was simple. He was just a human doing what humans do best, adapting, surviving, and feeling. But now he understood something larger. Humanity's gift was not in weapons, not in speed, not in machines, but in heart. And heart once shared could change worlds. As he stood on the observation deck, looking at the stars stretching endlessly into the void, Calith beside him, he smiled. The galaxy was vast, dangerous, unforgiving. But humanity had found its place, not through conquest, but through connection, and that place was just the beginning.